Hello and welcome to Somerville Neighborhood News. I'm Wendy Blom, the Executive Director of Somerville Community Access Television. Tonight is December 31st, New Year's Eve.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
And I'm Jane Regan, the Director of Somerville Neighborhood News, which is a community service production of SCATV, put together by staff, interns, and your neighbors. We bring you the news every 2 weeks on SCATV Channel 3 and on our website, somervilleneighborhoodnews.org.
Yep. And since it's the end of the year, we're going to take a look back at the 25 newscasts we did in 2014. But first, I'd like to say that Somerville Neighborhood News would not be possible without the hard work of all the staff here in the old firehouse, as well as the contributions of SCATV members.
Yeah, and we've also gotten a lot of help from the city's nonprofits, agencies, businesses, and the folks up at City Hall. You can't do a news story without information, documents, and interviews, and we get a lot of assistance getting all of that organized.
And, of course, we need to thank all of our reporters. We've had almost 20 intern reporters from lots of schools: Somerville High School, Tufts University, Boston University, Emerson College, Simmons, and Northeastern. They were amazingly talented, and we're so lucky to have all of their help. Together, we've produced over 12 hours of programming with about 200 separate news stories. One of the recurring stories this year was related to how Somerville is changing with new development, gentrification, higher taxes, higher real estate values. Let's look at some of those stories.
Sure. I think one of the reasons things are changing is the Green Line coming in. One of the stops will be right here in Union Square. But like any kind of change, it has its upsides, but it also has its downsides. Let's take a look at a video from early in 2014.
Somerville is in crisis. The homes and apartments here are becoming too expensive for the people who live here. I'm here at Clarendon Hill Apartments in the first in a series of stories focusing on the housing issue.
According to Zillow.com, an online real estate database, the median rent in Somerville is $2,100. That's up almost 17% since October 2011. There are programs for people who can't pay market rate for housing. There are rental subsidies available for those who qualify, sometimes called Section 8. And there are apartments at city, state, or federal housing developments for families or individuals like Mystic Apartments, St. Polycarp Village, and other locations around the city. Additionally, units are available for the elderly who qualify at places like Properzy Manor or Capon Court. These units are overseen by the Somerville Housing Authority.
Our role is to provide affordable housing, and it really is affordable housing. It's 30% of one's income. When your income goes up and your income goes down, your rent changes along with it. We have no vacancies. At any given moment, we might have one apartment, but it's already got 10 people on that waiting to move into that one apartment. So if you're very poor, you probably, if you're a Somerville resident and you're not an emergency, you will wait years and years, sometimes 5, 10 years before we could ever house you. Unfortunately, some of those people that are on that waiting list today may have to move long before we could ever contact them again. And now we're down to hundreds, close to 1,000 of people in Somerville that are still on those waiting lists.
The city and agencies have built or helped assure the creation of apartments and condos that are categorized as affordable housing. This means that they are rented or sold below market rate to individuals and families who qualify, generally because they make less than the area median income, which in 2013 was about $65,000 for individuals and $94,500 for a family of 4. Lately, officials have been talking a lot about housing, making promises that even more affordable housing units will be constructed.
We have a real plan for the city as laid out in Summer Vision. We have a range of things that we want to accomplish in Somerville. One of those components is the creation of 6,000 new housing units, 1,200 of them we've set a goal of making affordable.
At his inauguration, Mayor Joseph Curtatone promised to protect the people who live here.
We will protect those who have chosen Somerville and help shape Somerville. That starts with affordability. And affordability starts with housing. We will create a new affordable housing program for working middle-class families. We will not leave the middle class behind.
What is affordable? And I interview enough people, I know enough people, I know a lot of young groups that are in Somerville, and they'll all tell you if they don't own and they're here and they're starting families, many of them are not going to stay here.
City Hall is aware of the double-edged sword nature of Somerville's success. Let's hear from the mayor, who spoke to the Board of Aldermen recently.
As we've seen over the last years, for the first time in our lifetimes, people want to be here for that quality of life. People are lining up to come here to go to the schools, to be in this exceptional place to live, work, play, raise a family. But it's also a signal that we must remain vigilant on our pursuit of policies that will allow us to attain that and follow that oriented value, the type of community we want to be, and that will keep our tax bills manageable.
The city is also doing things to make sure that there's affordable housing in Somerville.
Yes, recently the administration announced that it's going to develop policies that will enable the construction of more affordable units. Commercial developers already pay what's called a linkage fee. That money goes into a special fund that's used for construction. But soon, the builders of big residential properties might have to make more of them affordable. Right now, I think most developments of 8 or more units have to make only 12% of them affordable, or if it's in Union Square, I think it's 15%.
I believe there was a recent very interesting story about affordable housing in Somerville.
Yes, that was a story where I tallied up all the big developments that are planned for the city. Together, they'll account for about 1,000 new units, but only 120 or so of them will be affordable. Let's take a look. Somerville is growing and changing. The one-bedroom units here at Assembly Square rent for $2,455 or even more. With 195 units, it's one of the biggest housing developments in the city, but it will soon be dwarfed by Block 6, according to city planner George Proakis.
In the springtime, Block 6 will break ground, which is a retail and residential building that's 250 feet high with 440 units. It's one of the largest buildings we've seen forthcoming, but it is not as big as the Partners building. But it is a big residential building and a big piece of continuing this block structure of the retail first floors in Assembly Square.
There are also plenty of other residential developments in store. 48 units for the old Sunoco site, 75 units next to the Stop and Shop on McGrath, 65 units on Washington Street, and over a dozen other medium to large-sized developments on Beacon, Broadway, Lowell, Medford, Summer, and on Somerville Avenue.
Rising real estate values is good for homeowners.
Sure, it's good if you want to sell your house and move away, but the problem is not everyone wants to leave Somerville. They want to stay right here. And a lot of taxpayers say that their tax bill is unmanageable. Let's take a look at this story from last February. It was a hearing. Many residents, especially seniors, have been up in arms since they got their property tax bills. On February 4th, they gave the alderman and the chief assessor a piece of their minds.
I thought it was a big mistake when I got my bill. I've always seen the taxes go up gradually, but not to the extent. It's $800 more than last year. I think it's very unfair. I was not given any notice, no warning about all of this happening. I'm on a fixed income, I'm widowed. I'd like to stay in Somerville, but I think common sense tells you you're going to drive the people out if this keeps up.
Edna Murphy was not the only one to criticize the city.
So maybe, in fact, we do need to raise more money, and maybe we need a plan for how we're going to do that. But suddenly springing it on people, on our businesses who are part of our community, on our neighbors, on ourselves, isn't a good recipe for how to run a city or our lives or a community.
Several speakers talked about how gains in property values are translating into real losses for the community.
We're talking a lot about taxes. I think what we should also be talking about is what kind of community do we want to live in? Do we want a community in which there is a rich network of relationships, in which there's diversity of age and income and race, and people look out for each other and people know each other, people know each other's names? Or do we want to live in a community in which there are a lot of high earners who work elsewhere, who don't participate in this community, who don't know each other, and who live here a few years and then move on? Do we want a community without children?
My grandmother, my grandparents, my parents, my kids, my cousins, every one of us lived here. And it breaks my heart that no one's here anymore.
Mayor Joseph Curtatone also showed up. He asked permission to speak and began by explaining that since 2007, the state has been continually reducing its aid to cities.
What the state does is push it down to cities and towns. And they say to you and say to us, you want those services? Go to your property taxpayers.
Part of the reason the city's getting so popular, of course, is the extension of the Green Line and the hipness of Union Square, which is about to have a major facelift. Didn't you do a lot of stories about Union Square's redevelopment?
You're not kidding. We did over 6 of them, and things are really moving forward. They've chosen a master developer. It's a Chicago-based consortium called US2. There are 6 parcels that are going to be redeveloped. It's going to cost over $1 billion. And the Green Line station construction has already started. US2 has promised to negotiate what's called a community benefits agreement, and that's meant to ensure that the redevelopment takes into account the desires and the needs of the people who work and live here already.
We're so lucky here in Somerville that we have an active citizen group, the Citizens Advisory Committee.
Yes, that is a pretty good representative group, but not everyone thinks that that's going to be representative enough. All of the members were handpicked by City Hall. Let's take a look at part of a video about a meeting where they discussed that. This is from last May.
Question about the difference between the Citizens Act and the Advisory Committee. The problem there is that that's top-down appointment. Okay, what we're doing is grassroots up appointment. So it's a big fundamental difference.
Individuals and organizations signed a pledge and shared their visions for the square. A major goal will be to get a community benefit agreement signed.
A community benefits agreement is it's a contract that's made between the community directly with the developers. And then what you try to do is get it into the master development agreement between the city and the developer, so that it's a binding contract where the developers are held accountable. A lot of the communities around the country now are negotiating up front with the developers so that they can mitigate all these things. Instead of doing it at the back end, they're doing it at the front end. And that's just a better way of doing it. The other advantage is that it pulls the community together and gives them a voice in the development process. Rather than having to go through the city, they do it directly.
Bridget Breton lives in Union Square.
Quiero saber información acerca de qué van a hacer en cuanto a las viviendas, porque están muy altas de precio y las rentas están subiendo cada vez más, y entonces me gustaría que hubiera un paro para esto. Hay personas que no tenemos unos trabajos donde ganamos suficiente para pagar las rentas que se están pidiendo en Union Square, y pues estoy aquí por eso, y también porque me gustaría que se creara un centro comunal donde los residentes nos pudiéramos reunir sin tener que pagar nada y podríamos discutir ciertos asuntos y a la vez también hacer alguna actividad que beneficie a la comunidad.
Ward 1 Alderman Matt McLaughlin also attended.
Well, it's not my ward. I am interested in seeing local jobs and affordability for people in the square. And also, just like Assembly Square, Union Square is a big development area. So all the aldermen have an interest in what goes on here.
Well, this will be a story that will certainly continue in 2015.
You're not kidding.
One of the great things about Somerville Neighborhood News is that we really tried to cover the diversity of the city. In fact, some of your stories are not even in English.
That's right. Of course, you know how diverse Somerville is. This year, we also did a number of stories about some of the more recent arrivals to the city. Some of them are part of the wave of the young people who came to the United States from Central America recently. Let's take a look at this video.
It is Tuesday, October 28, 2014.
Mis padres viven acá, vivo en El Salvador, vivía y por parte de ellos vine acá a conocerlos. Yo le comenté a mis padres que como iba a cumplir mis 15 años, necesitaba estar con ellos, porque no es lo mismo estar con los padres que con los abuelos.
Rewrite your story. Okay? Escribirlo de nuevo. Ahora, paso final. Okay? Limpio. I'll give you another paper.
Uno no anda tranquilo por caminando cuando va a estudiar, a comprar o algo, uno anda con temor que le salga a alguien, hacerle algo o algo. Entonces uno anda siempre con el temor y no anda tranquilo, pues por eso decide estar acá mejor.
Somerville public schools are home to hundreds of children from other countries. About 870 students, almost 20% of the city's public school students, are English language learners because they recently arrived in the U.S. 60 of them traveled to the U.S. alone or with other youth over the past year, taking great risk and often ending up in jail in southern Texas.
Bueno, ahí viene uno en carro, en bus, en tráiler. Es bastante difícil porque cuántos no han quedado muertos en México por X motivo. Y sí, cuesta bastante. Tuve una enfermedad que si más me muero, pulmonía. El doctor me dijo de que había sido por haber estado en las hieleras en Texas.
Pues el viaje no es tan fácil porque uno como de mujer, le voy a decir, se arriesga a todo, pero gracias a Dios no me fue lo que pensaba que era malo.
Sarah Davila is the director of English Learner Education. She oversees all the programs for students from immigrant families.
Unaccompanied youth is a particular profile of a student who is relocating to the community. For us, it's usually because there are family members already in the community. Oftentimes, those unaccompanied minors are undocumented. It's our responsibility to welcome every student into the district, and our approach is as soon as a student comes to Somerville, they are our students, period, and we don't need to know, and we're not interested in knowing about their residency status. We want them to be successful, and they come with particular needs, and we need to respond to their needs.
Box of cans.
Box of cans.
Box of cake.
Box of cake.
Box of coffee. Box of juice.
Box of juice.
Students take most of their courses in English right away, but they also take ESL or English as a second language. Alicia Sandeger is one of their teachers.
Oh, they have so many challenges. I mean, beyond just, let's say me moving to a different place and dealing with my, learning a new culture. Some of them are having to leave behind moms and dads and knowing they won't see them for many, many years. They're having to work so many hours a week, 40 hours, sometimes more than that a week. Beyond the challenges of sometimes they're coming with educations, like a fourth grade education. So they're being asked to do pre-biology, or they're being asked to do, algebra and geometry, and really put in situations where it is super hard. I mean, that's hard enough when you're not working 40 hours a week, but so those are a lot of the things many of our students are going through.
There was a recent story that I thought was so interesting about the root causes of immigration.
That's right. It wasn't exactly a story. It was more like an interview. Reporter Elijah Kaplan did an interview with Professor Aviva Chomsky of Salem State. Here's a little piece of it.
What are the historical and more recent causes to this movement that aren't discussed as publicly?
So I don't want to cover all of American history, although I could lecture you for an hour trying to answer that question. But some of the immediate causes of say, the migration of the last 2 or 3 decades are changes in the U.S. labor market and changes in the countries that migrants are coming from, and changes in the relationships between the United States and the countries that they're coming from. So let me just try to go over each of those really quickly. Changes in the U.S. labor market. We've seen a huge expansion of jobs at the lower end of the labor market. So migrants from Central America have always worked in these lower rungs, whether it's been in agriculture, in mining, in railroad building, jobs that are temporary, that are seasonal, that are unregulated, that are extremely dangerous and onerous. The loss of the manufacturing sector and the turning of our economy into a service economy has created a lot of very low-level service jobs that are frequently unregulated. A lot of immigrants work still in sectors like agriculture, but also in newly expanding sectors like home health care, like elder care, like landscaping, like fast food. The second thing is what's been happening in the countries that the migrants are coming from, primarily Mexico and Central America. And what's been happening there has been neoliberal reforms that have severely undermined social safety networks, and especially the ability of subsistence farmers to live on their land. And those have been imposed through free trade agreements like the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, or the Central America Dominican Republic Free Trade Agreement, CAFTA-DR. So many of the recent migrants are migrants from rural areas who have been turned into refugees by economic policies that make it impossible for them to survive on their land. If you look at Central America in particular, people are coming from 3 countries in Central America. They're not coming from everywhere in Central America. They're coming from El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. They're not coming from Nicaragua, Belize, Panama, and Costa Rica. And there's very clear reasons why migrants are coming from those 3 countries, and they have to do with U.S. interventions in those countries that have created extraordinary repression against popular movements for social change in those countries, scorched earth tactics that have driven people off the land, tactics amounting to genocide in Guatemala throughout the 1980s and into the 1990s, and the neoliberal policies that have followed those. It was the wars of the 1980s that sent the first generation of migrants to the United States. Many of those who are migrating now are the children of those who migrated in the 1980s.
The mayor's also gotten involved. He asked the police department not to automatically call the immigration police when they pick up someone who's undocumented.
Yes, that's actually one of the more significant things that this administration has done this year. Let's take a look at a news story about that.
On May 21st, Mayor Curtatone announced his plan to sign an executive order to end Somerville's participation in Secure Communities. Secure Communities is a program of the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency in conjunction with local law enforcement in order to check the legal status of people picked up by police. Patricia Montez is the executive director of Centro Presente, an organization that supports the Latin American immigrant community.
And the message is that the city of Somerville cares about democracy, about freedom, that the city of Somerville respects basic human rights of all people, including undocumented people.
All of you are an integral part of this community, and we would be poorer, not richer in this community, if we allowed families to continue to be broken apart.
El vivir y trabajar en los Estados Unidos de manera indocumentada no es un crimen. El estar en este país de manera indocumentada es una falta de carácter administrativo. Definitivamente tenemos que luchar de manera colectiva para que se dé una reforma migratoria justa, que respete los derechos humanos básicos de las comunidades inmigrantes, especialmente las indocumentadas. Y el día de hoy estoy muy feliz.
We have made it our mission in the city to protect our residents and not to persecute them.
I should say that we have had a ton of stories that look at all of the city's diversity. Diversity of age, country of origin, and language. We've also had a lot of stories from the high school this year. Here's a look at one of them.
This is Somerville's first Asian night. And so what happens is that from 6 to 7, we have Asian food. We have arts and craft, Chinese lanterns. We teach kids how to make the word for double happiness, which we display in New Year's.
So we form this kind of like, make this kind of like an art pattern. And it's very common in Chinese culture. You will see people put this kind of paper cuts everywhere in China.
With help from school faculty, Asian Night was organized by a new club at Somerville High School, the Friends of Asian Culture Club.
The Friends of Asian Culture Club was formed this year, and the purpose of the club is to promote awareness of Asian culture in Somerville, because Somerville High School is such a diverse high school, so many representations, and there are a lot of students who came to me and said, Ms. Guan, could we please form an Asian club? You know, we're so interested in China, Japan, Korea, especially in Korea. And I was like, well, I don't really know like about Korea. But they're okay, that's okay. Could you just like be the advisor? I'm like, okay. So that's how we formed. The second part is performance, and there will be student performers. There will be some parent performers. So we try to feature different parts of Asia, not just China.
One of the performers was Sadia Islam, a Somerville High junior who is also the secretary of the Friends of Asian Culture Club.
So why did you join the Friends of Asian Culture Club?
Well, it's because I'm actually Asian, as you can tell, but also it's I also wanted to learn more about the other countries in Asia, and I think I had really limited knowledge about those countries. So to learn more, basically, I just joined this club. When I was in 7th grade, someone thought India was not part of Asia, so which is really weird. So when you're saying Asian, you're referring to people who live in Middle East, people from China, Japan, India, Bangladesh, Nepal. They're all Asian. Just Asian doesn't have to like have a yellow skin. They can be like very, very dark skin or very, very like light skin, like white people.
Asia, where honors started, created grand empires, magnificent dynasties, all by inner will.
I think that there's more and more Asian population in both Boston and Somerville. And I think that maybe 10 years ago, 20 years ago, or 50 years ago, you didn't see as many Asians.
Well, our time's about up, and we only touched on some of the stories from this year. There were so many other stories from the high school, and you totally forgot to mention the stories related to the environment, the high school quiz show team, and how differently abled folks get around Somerville. And various labor-related stories were also very important.
Yep, and you also forgot our coverage of our favorite friends, the rats. Wendy, I think you helped on that story. We're going to have an update on those little critters early in 2015. Of course, you can see all of these stories at SomervilleNeighborhoodNews.org, where you can read most of them also. Or you can go to YouTube, search for Somerville Neighborhood News, and you can watch the videos.
Yep, and on that page, we also have a special video with all of the anchors and reporters that we've had in 2014.
Yes, it's actually kind of funny. You should check it out. Well, that's it for tonight. We'll be back on January 13th right here on Channel 3 at 7 p.m. or online. In the meantime, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.